This is out of your scope, Ava. Step aside.
My scope just expanded, William. I'm leading this initiative now.
I understand some of you are uncomfortable with the changes I'm proposing, but these measures are no longer optional.
I understand your position, but this approach is flawed. With all due respect, I've handled these negotiations for years.
I understand the projections, but you're overestimating the market response.
And you're underestimating this team's capability to execute.
The plan moves forward as presented.
I appreciate your concerns, but my decision is final. We implement the new strategy my way.
This is a mistake, Ava. Let me be clear, Ava. Your emotional response is clouding your judgment.
The board has decided to proceed without your input on this matter.
This merger is frankly beyond your scope, Ava.
My scope is maximizing returns. Your resistance is noted, but we are moving forward.
The office was eerily silent, save for the click of heels echoing through the hall. Ava Johnson, in her black blazer and determined stride, stepped into the conference room where the meeting was held. She had worked tirelessly for 5 years to climb the corporate ladder at Benton Industries, the prestigious marketing firm that prided itself on diversity. Or so they claimed. As she sat down, her manager, William Preston, flashed a tight smile across the table. Ava could feel his gaze, cold and dismissive, though he tried to mask it behind corporate niceties. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment she was supposed to be promoted to senior director, a position she had earned, not just by merit, but by resilience in a world that constantly told her she wasn't enough. But today, that dream was shattered. William's voice broke the silence, casual but laced with an unsettling undertone. Ava, we've decided to go in a different direction for the promotion. We feel someone with more experience, someone who, he paused for effect, not quite looking her in the eye, who fits better with the team. Ava's chest tightened, her breath shallow as the weight of the rejection settled. She was no longer in control of the narrative. The room felt smaller, suffocating. So, it's not about the work I've done, the numbers I brought in, the hours I put in, she asked, her voice steady but carrying a thin edge of disbelief. William shifted in his seat, trying to avoid her gaze. Ava, I think you understand. The implication lingered like smoke. Ava stood, the room spinning as her heart pounded. She knew exactly what he meant. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood, but her face was cold, as if the fire inside her had already begun to burn too hot to contain. As she turned to leave, a silent vow rose within her. This wouldn't be the end of her story. The fluorescent lights above hummed quietly, almost in rhythm with the pulse in Ava Johnson's temples. Her heart was pounding, though she was trying to mask it with every calculated step she took. This was supposed to be her moment. She had worked tirelessly for 5 years at Benton Industries, a prestigious marketing firm that had promised opportunity, diversity, and inclusion. For once, she had been certain that she had earned the promotion. The glass walls of the conference room loomed ahead of her, but Ava's thoughts felt trapped in the maze of what-if-s. What if they told her she wasn't enough? What if the work she had poured her heart and soul into, endless hours, sleepless nights, was still not enough to overcome the subtle, systemic forces that always seemed to push her aside? Her hand gripped the doorknob, pausing for just a moment. No, she thought, this is my moment. This is what I've worked for. The door opened with a soft creak, and she stepped inside, immediately met with the cold gaze of William Preston, her manager, sitting at the head of the sleek, glass-top table. The usual warm, welcoming office space now felt oppressive, the polished chrome chairs too clinical, the air too thick with expectation. Ava, thank you for coming in, William said, his voice warm, though there was something in the way he spoke that sent a chill down her spine. The tightness in his smile, the carefulness in his tone, it was all too rehearsed. Ava stood across the table from him, maintaining professionalism that had gotten her this far. But internally, her mind was racing. This is it. This is the moment where I prove I'm more than just the only black woman in the room. She had earned it. The numbers spoke for themselves. The clients loved her. The marketing campaign she had led outperformed expectations. She had done everything right. William cleared his throat. Ava, I want to start by saying that you've been an outstanding member of the team. You've really gone above and beyond. He paused, giving her a long, pointed look as if searching for the next words to say. It was the moment. She could feel her pulse quicken. She waited for the words that would come next. The acknowledgement, the promotion. She had done the work. It had to be Hayes. But William didn't speak again for a beat, almost as if collecting himself, his gaze shifting uneasily to the side. However, his voice trailed off, and for the first time, Ava noticed a subtle nervousness in his demeanor. Ava's stomach dropped, and she tried to steady her breath. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. She forced herself to listen as William continued, his voice becoming more clipped. We've decided to go in a different direction for the senior director role. After careful consideration, we feel someone with more experience, someone who fits better with the team, will be a better fit for the position. The words struck like a slap to the face, leaving Ava standing there, blinking in disbelief. A better fit? She felt the sting of the rejection, a bitter realization that all the work, all the late nights, and every ounce of energy she had put into her career meant nothing. This was it. The moment she had been working toward for years had just evaporated into thin air. Her mind was reeling. Ava wanted to speak. She wanted to shout, to demand an explanation. But instead, she felt something else surge up inside her, something cold, something furious. She could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air between them, the unspoken truth about what this rejection truly meant. It wasn't about the work. It wasn't about the experience. It was about fitting in, and she had never fit. William continued, unaware of the internal storm brewing inside her. Ava, we're still grateful for everything you've done, and I'm sure you'll continue to do great things here. Ava's mouth felt dry, but she managed to respond. So, it's not about the work I've done, the results I've delivered? You're telling me this has nothing to do with performance. William hesitated. For a brief moment, his confident facade cracked, his eyes flickering to the side. But then he shook his head, as though trying to dismiss her question. It's just the fit, Ava. You understand. Ava's chest tightened. I understand. Her blood boiled beneath her skin, but she forced her face into an unreadable mask. She had learned, over the years, how to suppress the anger, how to smile when they overlooked her, how to keep her voice steady when they acted as if her accomplishments were never enough. I understand, she repeated quietly, though the words felt like gravel in her mouth. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with a loud scrape, her hands trembling as she grabbed her bag. Thank you for your time, she said, the words barely escaping her lips before she turned and walked out of the conference room. But as she reached the door, she felt it, the faintest flicker of something within her, a promise she had made long ago. This wouldn't be the end of her story. The door shut behind her, and the silence was deafening. The elevator ride down felt like the longest of Ava's life. The air inside the glass-walled shaft was thick with a mix of tension and disbelief, a heaviness that settled over her like a blanket she couldn't shake off. She hadn't just been denied a promotion, she had been rejected by the very system she had poured herself into. And for what? For being different? For not fitting their narrow definition of success? The elevator dinged as it reached the ground floor, but Ava didn't move immediately. She stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed against the cold metal of the rail. She stared at her reflection in the polished walls, watching the way her brown skin contrasted against the sterile white walls. She didn't look like them. She never had. And now, she was starting to wonder if she ever would. It didn't matter how hard she worked. Ava had worked twice as hard as her peers, sometimes even more, just to get a fraction of the recognition they received so freely. She had built successful marketing campaigns, brought in clients, turned a few of Benton's failing projects into something lucrative. And for all of that, she had earned the chance at a senior role. But now she was back at square one, standing in a sea of colleagues who looked at her with polite smiles but never saw her as anything more than an asset that didn't belong in the spotlight. She felt the weight of their indifference pressing down on her, suffocating her. With a deep breath, she exited the building and stepped into the cool air of the street outside. The wind whipped against her face, but it couldn't clear the fog in her mind. She needed space. She needed to think. But there was no escaping the bitter taste of that rejection. She didn't know what to do next, where to go from here. Ava's phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, seeing a text from Carlton Hayes, a senior colleague who had always shown her some level of respect. His message was brief, but the concern in his words was palpable. "Ava, I heard about the promotion. I'm sorry. We need to talk. Call me when you can." Ava hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen. She knew Carlton's loyalty had always been to her. He was one of the few at Benton who recognized the unfairness of the system, even though he was part of it. But his message felt like a reminder that this was bigger than just a missed opportunity. It was a deeper issue that ran through the core Benton. She wasn't sure she was ready to talk. Not yet. She didn't want to explain herself to anyone. She was tired of explaining, tired of fighting for validation. But she knew she had to. She needed someone who might understand. After a beat, she typed back, "I'll call you later. I need to clear my head first." Ava slid her phone back into her pocket and took a deep breath. She walked aimlessly, the streets of the city moving around her, people going about their days while she felt frozen in place. She was good enough, she reminded herself. She had proven that time and again. Yet, it wasn't enough. The sting of the rejection lingered as she turned onto a quieter street, away from the bustling crowds. She pulled her coat tighter around her, as if to shield herself from the world. There was no escaping the realization. Benton Industries was a company that didn't believe in merit. It was a place where connections mattered more than skills, where fitting in was more important than excelling. And for all the talk of diversity, the truth was clear. Ava wasn't the right kind of diverse. She wasn't the right fit. The anger in her chest began to rise again, sharp and cold. But with it came something else, a quiet, burning resolve. She wasn't going to let this stand. She wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. She had spent enough of her life trying to meet their standards, trying to prove herself worthy of their approval. No more. Ava stopped walking and looked up at the tall buildings around her. Benton Industries was just one piece of the corporate world she had to navigate. She didn't have to stay in this game. There were other ways to win. There were other paths to power. Her eyes hardened with determination. She wasn't going to just accept the limits they'd placed on her. She wasn't going to shrink. If she had to, she would burn the whole thing down and rebuild it from the ground up. She just needed a plan. A voice in her mind whispered, "Take control." And in that moment, Ava knew Benton Industries wouldn't be a final battleground. She was going to build something bigger than their broken system. It was time to make her move. The days following her rejection at Benton Industries felt like a blur, each one blending into the next as Ava's thoughts consumed her. She spent her time trying to find a way forward, grappling with the emotions of being overlooked once again, an all too familiar feeling. But this time, it felt different. This time, she was determined not to let it define her. She had to fight back. It was late on a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. Ava had been at her desk, buried in research for a potential new project, when she saw the name on the screen, Carlton Hayes. Ava hesitated, then answered, "Carlton." "Ava." Carlton's voice was low, but there was an urgency in it that made her sit up straighter. "I need to talk to you." "What's going on?" Ava asked, trying to keep the concern from creeping into her voice. She and Carlton had always gotten along, but their paths rarely crossed outside of work-related conversations. They'd shared small moments of camaraderie, but she hadn't expected him to reach out like this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Carlton cleared his throat. "Look, I know what happened with the promotion. I know how badly this is hitting you." Ava felt a slight tightening in her chest. "I'm fine, Carlton. I'm just processing." "I get that," Carlton said, his voice sympathetic. "But I need you to hear me out. What happened to you? It's not just about that promotion. There's something bigger at play here." Ava furrowed her brow, trying to read between the lines of his words. "What do you mean?" Carlton sighed, and she could hear the weight of it in his breath. "I know you've been overlooked for a while now, and frankly, I've seen it happen to other people too. You're not the only one, Ava. This place, the whole corporate structure, is built on exclusion, and that's what's kept you from what you deserve." Ava swallowed. She hadn't expected this, but as Carlton spoke, Something in her clicked. She had been so focused on what she could change within Benton, on proving herself again and again. But there was another layer to the problem. The system itself was broken. "You're not the first person this has happened to," Carlton continued. "I've been here for a long time. I've seen how they treat people of color, how they only push certain individuals up while others are left behind. It's a cycle." Ava's mind was racing. He saw it too. She had never talked about it with him in such direct terms before, but now, the words that had been festering in her mind for years were being spoken aloud. "I've been pushing this thought around in my head for a while now, and I think it's time we do something about it." Carlton's voice softened, but his words were steady, as if he had made up his mind long before picking up the phone. "I've seen what you're capable of, Ava. I know you've got the skill, the drive, the intelligence to lead, not just here, but anywhere." Ava paused, trying to process what he was saying. "Anywhere? Carlton, I'm not sure what you're getting at," she said slowly. Carlton sighed again. "What I'm saying is, you shouldn't have to keep fighting to be seen. You shouldn't have to keep proving yourself to people who don't care. I've been talking to some folks, and we think we might be able to do something bigger here. Something that could take Benton and the system down a notch." Ava's heart skipped. "What are you suggesting?" He lowered his voice, as though making sure no one was listening. "You've been talking about change, about doing things differently, but you don't have to do it alone. If you're serious about taking control, there are people who are willing to back you up, people who want to see the company and the way it operates shaken up." Ava felt a jolt of surprise. She had known that Carlton was frustrated with the corporate structure at Benton. He'd hinted at his discontent before, but she never imagined that he was working on something larger, something secret. "You've got a plan," Ava said slowly, her mind whirring. "But I can't just walk in and take Benton Industries. I don't have the power. I don't have the resources." Carlton's laugh was almost bitter. "That's the thing. You don't need them. Not anymore. But what you do need is leverage. And I've got a few ideas about that." Ava leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Tell me more." Later that evening, Ava met with Carlton at a nearby bar, the low hum of conversation surrounding them as they sat in a quiet corner booth. Carlton had been deep in the company for years. He understood its inner workings, the politics, the deals, the backdoor conversations. Ava had been so focused on proving herself to the system that she hadn't realized how much power had been available to her if she was willing to play the game in a different way. Carlton explained that Benton Industries was running in the red behind closed doors. The company was underperforming financially, and though it presented itself as a titan in the marketing world, it had many of the same issues that had kept Ava on the sidelines, a failure to acknowledge its systemic flaws. "There are people who've been pushed out," Carlton said, his voice lower now. "People like you, smart, capable, and overlooked. But there are others like me who've seen it all and are ready to make some noise. We have the opportunity. Ava, you have the opportunity to take back control, but it'll take more than just a promotion." Ava's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't just about fighting for a title anymore. It was about fighting for what Benton could be. It was about exposing the corporate culture for what it really was, rotten at its core. "What do we need to do?" Ava asked, her voice steady now, her mind fully aligned with what they were discussing. Carlton leaned in, his eyes intense. "You need to buy it." Ava blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Buy it?" Carlton nodded. "If you can get the financial backing, if you can get the support, we can take over. The company's on the edge. Benton is vulnerable. And you're the one who can turn it around. But you'll need to act fast. If you wait too long, they'll bury this, and you'll never get another shot." Ava felt a strange calm wash over her. For the first time since a rejection, she felt the stirrings of something that had been buried deep inside her, the belief that she could change everything. "I'm in," she said, her voice low but firm. "Let's do it." Carlton smiled, and for the first time, Ava saw the plan unfolding clearly before her. This was her chance to own it. Benton Industries was about to face a reckoning. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Ava dove into research, reviewing Benton Industries' financials, looking for cracks, weaknesses, anything that could serve as leverage. She needed a way in, a way to make her vision of the company a reality. Carlton's words kept echoing in her mind. You can't change the system from within. You need to tear it down and rebuild it. She was in too deep now, her resolve hardened like steel. Benton Industries had been built on privilege, on favoritism, and on a system that ensured people like her would never reach the top. Ava wasn't just fighting for promotion anymore. She was fighting for a complete overhaul of a broken system. She wasn't alone, either. Carlton had promised to help her, but he had warned her that they couldn't do it without the right backing. There were some allies, but to succeed, Ava needed capital. Real capital. The first step was going to be confronting human resources, the very system that had continually blocked her path. HR had always been the gatekeeper, the final arbiter of promotions. She needed to force them to acknowledge the systemic failures that had plagued her and others like her. If nothing else, she would ensure they understood that she wasn't going to back down. Ava called in to schedule a meeting with Sarah Delaney, the HR manager, who had always been polite to her but never shown any true support. As Ava walked through the glass-walled hallways of Benton's sleek office building, she could feel the weight of the company's judgment pressing down on her. Each step toward HR felt heavier than the last. Saya was seated at her desk when Ava entered, her blonde hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, a friendly smile painted on her face. But Ava could see the nervousness behind it. She knew this wasn't going to be a routine conversation. Ava, hi, what can I do for you today? Saya asked, her voice light, though Ava could sense the undercurrent of discomfort. Ava took a deep breath and sat down, her posture rigid with intent. We need to talk about the recent promotion decision, she said firmly, without preamble. She could see Sa's eyes widen just slightly, and the smile faltered. Of course, Sa said, her voice faltering a bit. I'm sure you have some concerns, but you know we follow the process, and everything is done with the utmost. No, Ava interjected, cutting her off. It's not about the process. Her eyes fixed on Sa, and she could see her growing uncomfortable. It's about the fact that this company, despite all its talk about diversity and inclusion, has one set of rules for certain people and another set for others. It's about the fact that you've never once considered me for the role, because I didn't fit into the mold of who you think belongs at the top. Sa's eyes darted around, clearly flustered. Ava, I can assure you this isn't about race. No. Ava shot back, leaning forward, her voice growing colder. Tell me, Sa, how many black senior directors are there at Benton? How many people of color have been promoted to the positions where they could truly influence the direction of this company? And yet, you still expect me to believe that this decision wasn't based on a bias that runs deeper than any of your processes? Sa opened her mouth to respond, but Ava didn't give her the chance. You talk about fairness, but there's no fairness here. Every time I've been passed over, every time I've seen someone with less experience, less capability, get the position, I've been told that I need to wait my turn, that I need to be more patient. Well, Sa, I'm done waiting. Ava's voice was steady, but the fire in her chest burned hot. She could feel the words gaining strength as she spoke. I'm not going to wait anymore. This company needs to change, and it needs to change now. If you truly believe in fairness, if you truly believe in inclusion, then you'll support me. Not as a favor, but because I deserve this. I have earned it. The room was silent for a beat. Saya's face had drained of color, her usual composed demeanor slipping as Ava's words hung in the air between them. You can't just... Saya started, her voice shaky. I'm not asking for permission, Ava said, cutting her off again. I'm telling you that I will not sit idly by while this company continues to perpetuate a system that leaves people like me behind. You can either get on board with that change, or you can get out of my way. Ava stood, straightening her blazer, and gave Sa one last piercing look before turning toward the door. I'll be speaking to the board next, she said, her voice final. This conversation is just the beginning. As Ava walked out of the HR office, she felt a surge of energy. She had confronted the system, had spoken truth to power, and now the pieces were falling into place. Benton Industries had no idea what was coming for them. The old guard wasn't going to let her take control without a fight, but Ava wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. Ava's mind raced as she walked out of the HR office, the weight of her words still echoing in her ears. 4 years. She had played by their rules, tried to fit into their narrow definitions of success, but today, everything changed. She wasn't asking for permission anymore. She wasn't begging to be seen. She was demanding it. But even as the adrenaline from her confrontation with HR surged within her, a nagging feeling lingered. What now? The systems that kept her at arm's length were vast and entrenched. Benton Industries wasn't just a company. It was a machine, a corporate behemoth built to perpetuate itself, to favor those who fit a very specific mold. Ava knew it wasn't going to be easy. This wouldn't be some quick, painless victory. Still, something had shifted. She felt it in her bones, the quiet hum of change, just beneath the surface, pushing its way through. Over the next few days, she dug deeper. Ava met with Carlton again, who, as promised, helped her map out a plan to begin dismantling the structure that had kept her in her place for so long. The financials of Benton Industries were worse than she had anticipated. The company's image was pristine, but the foundation was shaky. They were on the edge of a major downturn, their debt growing, their leadership failing to address the systemic rot beneath the surface. Ava started putting together a team of trusted individuals, people who had seen what she saw, who had been pushed out of opportunities or overlooked for their talent. Some were still within Benton's walls, quietly working away at their desks, keeping their heads down to avoid rocking the boat. Others were former employees who had long since left the company, burned out by the system, but still carrying the scars of their experiences. She knew it would take more than just a few whispers in the right ears to shift the tide, but it had to start somewhere. It was a late Thursday evening when Ava's breaking point finally arrived. She had just wrapped up a meeting with a few of her new allies, mostly former Benton employees who had valuable insights into the company's financial mismanagement, when she received a text from Ellen Montgomery, the woman who had been promoted in her place, the woman who had been given the position Ava had owned. "I heard you're meeting with the board tomorrow. Hope you've got your ducks in a row. Wouldn't want you to look foolish." Ava stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to lash out with every ounce of frustration, to expose the fact that Ellen had gotten promotion only because she fit the mold. But Ava knew better. She couldn't afford to lose her cool now, not when she was so close to her goal. Instead, she replied with a single, sharp line. "Just remember who had the job first." That was enough. The reply from Ellen came in seconds. "Better luck next time." The message stung, but Ava didn't let it show. It was exactly the kind of response she had come to expect from the likes of Ellen. Dismissive, condescending, as if a position was an inevitability. Ava's fingers tightened around her phone, her mind beginning to boil over. She had spent too many years being told she wasn't good enough. Too many years being forced to prove herself while those around her coasted on privilege. The anger swelled within her, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. It wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about proving to the world that people like her, people who had been told to wait their turn, were not just going to sit quietly and play by their rules. She had given them enough time. "Carlton," she murmured to herself, dialing his number. When he answered, his voice was warm but cautious. He knew something had shifted in her since their last meeting. "Ava, what's going on?" Carlton asked. "I'm done playing their game," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of excitement and anger. "I'm done asking for permission. I'm taking control." Carlton's response was immediate. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious. I've already made the first move with HR, and tomorrow I'm meeting with the board. It's time to expose everything. The financials, the mismanagement, the bias. It's time for them to answer for what they've done." Carlton was silent for a moment, then spoke. "You've been pushing for this change for years, Ava. But this isn't just a battle. This is war." Ava smiled grimly. "And I'm ready for it." The following day, she walked into that boardroom with a calm she hadn't felt in years. The same boardroom where, just a week ago, she had been denied what was rightfully hers. She stood tall as she faced the same faces, the same men and women who had smiled at her with polite condescension, who had brushed her aside like an afterthought. They had never believed she belonged in the corner office. But today, she would make them see just how wrong they had been. William Preston was there, of course. His suit looked perfectly pressed, his hair neatly styled, but there was something different about him now, something that suggested, for the first time, that he was actually nervous. He had expected her to fold. He had expected her to stay in line. He was wrong. Ava addressed the room, her voice steady, but commanding. I'm here today because I've seen the cracks in Benton Industries. The financial instability, the systemic bias, the underperformance. You've all turned a blind eye to it for too long, but it's time to face the truth. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've secured the backing to buy Benton Industries and take control of the company. This isn't just about a promotion. This is about changing the way you've run things here for far too long. The shock on their faces was exactly what she had hoped for. You have a week to decide, she said, her gaze cold and unwavering. After that, I go public with everything I've uncovered. A long silence followed, but in that silence, Ava knew one thing for sure. She was no longer asking for permission. The days after Ava's confrontation with the board were a blur of activity. Benton Industries had no idea what was coming for them. Ava felt the pulse of the company's vulnerability, the cracks in facade that no one wanted to address. But she saw them clearly, every misstep, every failure, every opportunity that had been squandered. The board had been rattled. She could see that much in their silence. They hadn't expected her to be so bold, so decisive. They had expected her to be the quiet, compliant employee, the one who accepted the unfairness and pushed it down. But Ava wasn't that woman anymore. She was ready to take control of the reins. But to do that, she needed more than just leverage. She needed capital. Real capital. The financial backing to turn her vision into a reality. The first step was going to be securing an investor who could help her purchase a company, someone who had the clout and the connections to back her up. That was where Dorian Blackwell came in. Dorian was a high-net-worth investor with a reputation for taking risks on undervalued companies. He had made his fortune in tech and real estate, but recently his portfolio had expanded into more traditional industries. Ava had met him once at a networking event. He had been sharp, confident, and calculating, with an air of someone who always got what they wanted. Ava had been impressed by him, though she hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now, she knew he could be the key to unlocking Benton's future. Carlton had introduced them, setting up a meeting at one of Dorian's high-end private offices downtown. Ava had expected the meeting to be tense, with Dorian skeptical of her plans. After all, no one in the corporate world liked to bet on a woman who had been rejected by the very company she sought to own. But Ava wasn't going to let that intimidate her. When she entered the sleek, modern space where Dorian waited, he stood up to greet her, a smooth, confident smile on his face. Ava, it's good to finally meet you in person, he said, shaking her hand firmly. His grip was strong, his eyes piercing, as though he was already evaluating her worth. Carlton's spoken highly of you. Thank you, she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside her. I need your help. Benton Industries is on the brink of a crisis. I have an opportunity to take over the company, but I need someone who can back me financially. Dorian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. He studied her for a moment, his gaze never wavering. And why Benton Industries? From what I've heard, it's a sinking ship. The leadership is failing, the numbers aren't adding up, and it's running out of time before investors start pulling the plug. I know that, Ava said, her voice calm but resolute. But that's exactly why I need to take control. The company's image is pristine, but beneath the surface, it's rotting. I've been there for 5 years. I've seen the systemic issues that no one wants to address. The problems run deep: financial mismanagement, underperformance, and a corporate culture that keeps people like me from advancing. Dorian's eyes narrowed, intrigued by her confidence. I can see you're not just in this for a quick win. You're serious about fixing things. But what makes you think you can turn it around? I don't just want to fix it, Ava said, leaning forward, her voice dropping lower. I want to make Benton a company that values talent over privilege, a place where merit is the only thing that matters. The people there, especially the ones you'd never see in the corner office, are brilliant. They are just waiting for someone to believe in them. Dorian nodded, clearly considering her words. So you're not just buying a company, you're buying a culture, and you're willing to bet on the idea that you can change it. Ava's heart pounded in her chest, but she held his gaze. Yes, Benton has potential, but it needs someone who isn't afraid to break the mold and rebuild it from ground up. Dorian sat back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the desk as he thought. It's a risky move. Benton's leadership may be bad, but they still have connections. And you'd be taking on a whole host of challenges, legal, financial, and social. The company won't just hand itself over to you. Ava nodded, her voice unwavering. I'm not asking them to. I have the leverage I need. I know the financials. I know their vulnerabilities. And most importantly, I know I can turn it around. Dorian finally smiled, a glint of approval in his eyes. You're bold. I like that. And I believe you can do it, Ava. But you'll need more than just your passion to pull this off. You'll need capital, strategy, and the right connections. Ava felt a spark of hope. That's why I'm here. I need you to back me. Dorian leaned forward, his fingers still steepled, but now his expression was calculating. I'll need to see the numbers. Show me your plan, how you intend to not only take control of Benton but make it profitable again. And I need you to prove that you have the strength to weather the fallout. You'll be facing an uphill battle. If I invest, I'm in it for the long haul. Ava's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. I'll show you, she said, her voice steady with confidence. I'll give you the numbers, the plan, and the proof. Benton Industries is about to get a new CEO, and I will make it better than it's ever been. Dorian smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. All right, Ava, let's see what you've got. You've got my attention. As they discussed the details of the deal, Ava's mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the next steps. She wasn't just fighting for promotion anymore. She was fighting for control. Benton Industries was about to become her legacy. The weeks following Ava's meeting with Dorian Blackwell felt like a whirlwind. The days blurred together as she pulled together the last pieces of her plan, carefully calculating, mapping out each step, and preparing herself for what was about to come. Dorian had agreed to back her, but only on one condition. She had to prove the viability of her vision. He wasn't going to invest in a sinking ship unless she could show him that Benton Industries was worth saving, and more importantly, that she was the one capable of leading the change. Ava spent long nights in the office, huddled over financial reports, client histories, and internal memos. She pored over everything, finding every flaw, every weakness that had been ignored for years. She studied the past 5 years of Benton financial data, tracing the patterns of mismanagement, poor investments, underutilized resources, and the ever-growing gap between the company's surface-level success and its actual performance. Benton was teetering on the edge, and Ava knew it. The board hadn't realized it yet, but Benton's facade was already cracking. All Ava had to do was push just a little harder, and it would all come crumbling down, giving her the opening she needed to step in and take control. Carlton had been invaluable, helping her strategize and organize her attack. He provided her with insider knowledge about Benton's key clients, some of whom had already begun pulling away from the company due to a lack of trust in its leadership. But there was still one more piece to the puzzle, the board. They were going to be the hardest obstacle to overcome. They wouldn't simply hand over the reins to a woman they had spent years undermining. No, Ava had to be strategic. She needed to give them an offer they couldn't refuse, and at the same time, expose their weaknesses. The final meeting with the board was scheduled for Friday afternoon, the last day before her one-week deadline. Ava felt a calm resolve settle over her. This was it. This was the moment she had been working toward. She arrived at the boardroom with Carlton by her side. As they entered, the usual faces were present. William Preston, the smug, arrogant face of Benton, and the rest of the executives, most of whom had their noses buried in their tablets or phones, ignoring the importance of the meeting they were about to sit through. Ava felt a flicker of anger. These people had all but handed over the company to a less qualified, more appropriate candidate just weeks ago, and now they would pay for their complacency. She stood at the head of the table, her back straight and her eyes unwavering. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice clear, calm, and laced with authority. "I'm here to discuss the future of Benton Industries, and I'm here to take control of it." The room fell silent. Ava could feel the shock wave ripple through the board as she placed a sleek, bound packet of documents on the table. William's eyes narrowed, though he kept his composure. He was no longer the confident figure he once was. Ava could see it. He was on edge, just as the rest of them were. I've spent the last few weeks evaluating Benton's performance, Ava continued, and I've found the cracks, the mismanagement, the growing financial instability, the systemic biases within the company. I know Benton can be more than what it is right now, but it will never reach its potential under the current leadership. She let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching the board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Ava wasn't speaking to them just for effect. She was speaking to them because she wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done, how they had ignored the warning signs, how they had let Benton slip into disarray because they were too comfortable with their power. Ava's voice grew steady and unyielding. I have secured the financial backing to buy Benton Industries. I'm here to offer you a deal. Either sell Benton to me, and I will lead it into a new era, or continue as you are and watch it crumble. The board looked at one another in disbelief. Ava had seen them dismiss her time and again, but this time they were staring down the reality of her resolve. William tried to compose himself, but his voice faltered. Ava, you're talking about taking over Benton Industries, a company with deep roots and an established presence in the market. This isn't some startup. I'm not here to discuss the technicalities of ownership, Ava interrupted, her tone unwavering. I'm here to discuss your failure to lead this company effectively. Benton is drowning under poor decisions, outdated strategies, and the kind of leadership that refuses to evolve. I'm giving you a choice. Either sell it to me or watch it fail. William's face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You think you can just waltz in here and take over? His voice grew louder, defensive. You're not even a part of this board. Ava, you're one of the junior executives. You have no claim to this company. Ava's eyes locked onto his, her voice quiet but with a quiet force. I've been here for 5 years. I've earned the respect of clients. I've turned failing projects into success stories, and I've been part of the backbone of Benton Industries. I am the future of this company, not you. The room was still, all eyes now on William, who was clearly losing his grip on the situation. The cracks in his control were becoming obvious. He could feel it, and the rest of the board could feel it too. Ava placed a second folder in front of them, thicker than the first, filled with financial analyses, projections, and reports detailing Benton's weaknesses, its unsustainable debt, and its declining client base. Here's the reality, Ava said. This company is not what you think it is. I've done my homework. I've found the holes. I've got the leverage. You know it. I know it. William, now visibly shaken, shot a glance at the others around the table. None of them had expected this. The room that had once been a fortress of privilege now seemed like a house of cards about to collapse. The offer is on the table, Ava continued, her voice calm, but filled with finality. You have 1 week to decide. After that, I will go public with all of this, and Benton Industries will be exposed for what it truly is. The silence stretched out, and for a moment, Ava allowed herself to enjoy the weight of the moment. The victory was close, and it tasted sweeter with each passing second. Finally, William, unable to maintain his composure, stood. You'll never get away with this. You'll never control Benton. Ava stood, facing the board, her gaze unwavering. I already do. The days after the board meeting felt like a blur of tense anticipation. Ava had laid everything on the table. The facts, the financials, the proof that Benton Industries was barely treading water. She had shown them the inevitable collapse that was coming if things didn't change, and they had no choice but to listen. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Over the next week, Ava continued to push forward with her plans. She met with potential investors, securing more financial backing, making sure her offer would be as attractive as possible. But she also knew the clock was ticking. Benton's leadership was running out of time, and so was she. She couldn't let up, not now. As the deadline drew near, Ava received the call she had been waiting for. The voice on the other end of the line was tight, controlled, but it couldn't hide the panic beneath. It was Sarah Delaney, the HR manager, calling to inform her that the board had agreed to her offer. You're going to own Benton? Sarah asked, as though she couldn't quite believe it. Just like that. Ava took a deep breath. Yes, they've agreed to sell the company to me. Officially, I'll be taking control next week. There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again, her voice dropping lower. "I don't know if I should congratulate you or warn you. This company, this system, it's not built for people like you." Ava's lips curled into a smile, though it wasn't a joyful one. "I'm aware, but that's the point. It's time for a change." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, meetings with executives, and setting up her new office. But beneath the surface of all the excitement, Ava couldn't shake the quiet sense of disbelief that she was really doing this. She was taking control. On the day of the official takeover, Ava walked through Benton Industries' gleaming glass doors as a new CEO. She didn't feel the weight of the title, at least not in the way others might have expected. To her, it wasn't just a position of power. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had been denied, and everything that had been taken from her over the years. She had walked through the halls of Benton countless times before, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the sterile, corporate building. But today, it felt different. Today, she was walking with purpose, with a quiet power that came from knowing she had earned this. She had built this moment. Ava's first meeting as CEO was set for that afternoon. The executives who had once overlooked her, the ones who had dismissed her as not the right fit, were now seated around the table, their faces tight with forced professionalism. William Preston, the man who had rejected her for the senior director role just weeks ago, was sitting at the head of the table. The power had shifted. He was no longer the one in charge. Ava entered the room with Carlton at her side. She took a seat at the head of the table, the chair once occupied by William. He shifted uncomfortably, but Ava didn't acknowledge him. She had no time for games anymore. This was business. "We're here to discuss Benton's future," Ava said, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that commanded attention. "But I think it's important that we address the past first." William opened his mouth, clearly trying to find a word to regain control, but Ava didn't give him the chance. "Benton's system is broken," she continued, her gaze sweeping over the executives. "And I'm here to fix it. This company will no longer be run on old habits, on favoritism, or on a culture that pushes people out simply because they don't fit into a certain mold. Benton will be a place where hard work and talent are rewarded, no matter who you are, where you come from, or how you look." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. "The first thing I'm doing is restructuring. We're going to address the leadership gaps, the failures in our financials, and most importantly, the bias that has infected this company at every level. I'm not here to play nice, and I'm not here to protect your egos. I'm here to rebuild Benton from the ground up." Ava's voice rang out, steady and unwavering, as she turned her attention back to William. "You're no longer in charge, William. And frankly, I think it's time you start thinking about what comes next for you." William's face flushed a deep red, his jaw tight. He opened his mouth to argue, but Ava raised her hand, silencing him. "I don't need to hear any more excuses," she said coolly. "You've had your time. You're free to leave. The board has already been informed that your position is no longer necessary." William's face twisted in disbelief. The rest of the board members looked around, unsure of how to react. But Ava remained calm, her eyes never leaving William, her gaze sharp and unforgiving. Finally, he stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His eyes burned with anger, but he knew there was nothing he could say. He had lost. Benton was no longer his to control. "I'll be leaving then," William muttered, his voice tinged with bitterness. He turned sharply and exited the room, his departure signaling the end of an era at Benton Industries. As the door closed behind him, Ava allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The old guard was gone. The reins of the company were now in her hands. "Now," Ava said, her voice carrying authority, "let's talk about the future." The weight of what Ava had just done settled heavily on her shoulders, but she couldn't afford to pause and reflect. Not yet. Benton Industries was hers, but she knew the hardest part of this journey was just beginning. The power she had taken wasn't something she could simply enjoy. It was a responsibility, and she was already starting to feel the cost of it. In the days that followed, Ava buried herself in work. She spent countless hours in meetings, reorganizing departments, meeting with clients, and building the new culture that Benton desperately needed. But despite her success in taking over, there was a gnawing emptiness inside her. She had fought so long for this, had endured so much, but now that she was at the helm, the victory felt bittersweet. There were moments when Ava would look out over the city from her new office, the sprawling skyline stretching out before her, and wonder if this was truly what she had wanted. The path to this position had cost her more than she had realized. She had lost so much of herself along the way, friends, relationships, even parts of her own soul. Her phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced down and saw Carlton's name on the screen. "We need to talk. Meet me at the usual place tonight." Ava sighed and typed a quick response. "I'll be there." The truth was, she hadn't seen much of Carlton since the takeover. Their work had consumed her, and though she appreciated his support, she hadn't made the time to check in with him, her one true ally in this battle. Later that evening, Ava sat across from Carlton in their usual spot at the quiet cafe downtown. The place had become a haven for them, somewhere they could talk about everything they couldn't discuss in the office. She watched as he stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his expression unreadable. Carlton was the first to speak. "How are you holding up, Ava? I know this has been a whirlwind, but I need to know, you're not burning yourself out, are you?" Ava smiled softly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Carlton. Just a little overwhelmed, but I'm handling it." Carlton studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward. "You're handling it, but at what cost? You've done something incredible, but this isn't just a victory. You've shaken up the entire structure, and there will be consequences." Ava nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I know. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I've been fighting for this my whole life. For the chance to lead. To prove that I belong." Carlton's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "It's more than that, Ava. It's about what you're willing to lose in order to gain it. You've already sacrificed a lot. Your sanity, your peace, your relationships. What happens when you fought so hard for something, and then you realize it's taken more from you than you're ready to give?" Ava looked down at her coffee, her fingers tapping gently against the cup. "I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought this would fix everything. But now that I'm here, it feels like there's still something missing." Carlton sat back, his expression unreadable. "That's a danger. When you focus so much on the goal, on winning, you forget what it costs to get there. I've seen it before, with people who climb the ladder, only to realize they've left their soul behind on every rung." Ava was silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling deep within her. Had she left parts of herself behind in this pursuit? She hadn't realized just how much this victory would change her. It wasn't just the stress or the long hours. It was the isolation that came with it. The higher she rose, the further she seemed to drift from the people who had supported her. The very same people who had believed in her, who had seen her as something more than just a token or a placeholder in a system built to keep people like her in the margins. Now that she was in power, it felt like those relationships were being left behind, and with them, her sense of connection to the world she had fought so hard to change. Carlton's voice broke through her thoughts. "You can't do this alone. Ava, you've got the company now, but you have to make sure you're not losing everything else in the process." Ava met his gaze, her voice softer now. "I don't know if I can balance both. I don't know if I'm capable of keeping it all together." Carlton smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for her to admit it. "You don't have to do it alone. You've got people who care about you, people who've been with you from the start. But you need to be willing to lean on them, to trust that you don't have to carry this weight by yourself." Ava sat back, the exhaustion catching up with her. She had been so focused on proving herself that she had neglected to truly connect with those around her. She had been carrying everything on her shoulders, convinced that she could do it all. But she was starting to see now that even the strongest people needed help. "I think I've been so focused on showing them I can do it that I forgot what it feels like to have support," Ava admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to appear weak." Carlton placed his hand gently on the table. "Asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It's okay to let people in." Ava took a deep breath, the pressure on her chest lifting just slightly. She had a long road ahead of her, and the challenges of leading Benton Industries were far from over. But maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be as difficult as she had thought. Maybe the key to real success wasn't doing it all on her own. It was in building a network of people who could help her carry the load. For the first time in a long time, Ava allowed herself to believe that she didn't have to sacrifice everything just to make her mark. She could lead and still be whole. It was a lesson she had needed to learn, and one she wouldn't soon forget. The first few months after Ava took control of Benton Industries were a whirlwind of decision-making, restructuring, and rebuilding. Benton wasn't just a company to her anymore. It was a symbol, a living, breathing testament to everything she had fought for and everything she hoped to change. Every policy she put in place, every adjustment to their way of working, was an effort to right the wrongs she had experienced firsthand. She was determined to create a company where everyone, no matter their background, would have the same opportunities to thrive. But as she sat at her desk one late evening, looking out at the sprawling city below, she realized that even the most meaningful victories came at a cost. Benton was improving. Clients were returning, profits were climbing, and the company culture was beginning to shift. But so much of the process had been a battle. And in the process, she had lost things she wasn't sure she could get back. Carlton's words rang in her ears. You've got people who care about you, people who've been with you from the start. She knew he was right. She had distanced herself from everyone, including him, in her pursuit of this new vision. Ava had put everything into Benton, but she had to remind herself that it wasn't just about the company. It was about her life, about her friends, her family, her relationships. As much as she had focused on tearing down the old systems that had kept her down, she had neglected to nurture the very people who had been there when she had nothing but a dream and a spark of ambition. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her messages. It had been weeks since she had last spoken to her mother, months since she'd had a real conversation with Carlton, who had continued to be a rock of support even from a distance. Ava had been so focused on proving herself that she had abandoned the things that truly mattered. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and Dorian Blackwell walked in, his usual sharp smile tempered with an understanding that only people who had been through hard-fought battles could truly appreciate. "Ava," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Got a minute?" "Always for you," she said with a tired smile, gesturing for him to sit. "What's up?" "I've been hearing good things," he began, settling into the chair opposite her. "Business is up. The culture's shifting in the right direction, and people are starting to believe in Benton again. You've done exactly what you said you would." Ava nodded, though a part of her still felt unsettled. "It's been a lot. More than I thought, honestly. But it's not just about the profits. It's about making it better for everyone who's been left behind. I can't forget about that." Dorian smiled, but it was knowing, almost paternal. "That's the thing about change, Ava. It's never as easy as we think. It takes more than just a company. It takes you. And I think you've forgotten that part." Ava looked up at him, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You've spent so much time focusing on what the company can become, on fixing what's broken, that I think you've neglected to take care of the person who is to lead it all," Dorian said gently. "Your health, your relationships, they need just as much attention as Benton does. A company won't run without a leader who's whole. You can't pour from an empty cup." The words hit her like a weight, pressing down on her chest. Dorian had been right. For so long, she had convinced herself that Benton's success would be the cure for everything. But as she had climbed higher and higher, she had left a trail of personal connections behind. The exhaustion, the isolation, and the constant pressure had taken their toll. "I didn't think it would be like this," Ava said, her voice quieter now. "I thought if I built something that worked, if I showed everyone I was capable, that everything else would fall into place. But now, I feel like I've lost so much of myself in the process." Dorian's gaze softened. "The path you've taken isn't easy, Ava. But I think you've forgotten something important. Success isn't just about what you accomplish. It's about what you leave behind. The people who matter, the relationships that keep you grounded. You've made Benton what it is today, but what are you making for yourself?" Ava sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent years fighting for validation, for her seat at the table, for her right to lead. But in doing so, she had distanced herself from the very things that had once motivated her. Her friendships, her family, her own peace of mind. "I don't know how to balance it all," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "It feels like something has to give, and every time I turn around, I'm giving more and more of myself." Dorian's smile returned, though softer now. It's not about balance, Ava. It's about choice. You can choose to keep giving everything to Benton, or you can choose to take some time for yourself. You've earned that, don't you think? Ava's heart pounded as she realized how true his words were. She had fought for Benton for so long, but somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that she, too, was worth fighting for. Her happiness, her health, her relationships, they all mattered just as much. I've spent too long trying to prove myself, she said, her voice clearer now. I think it's time I start proving to myself that I can be both a leader and a person, not just a CEO. Dorian nodded. That's the most important realization you'll ever make, Ava. Don't forget it. The next few weeks were transformative. Ava began carving out time for herself, calling her mother, spending time with friends, and even reconnecting with Carlton. She didn't lose sight of her goals for Benton, but she began to understand the delicate balance between ambition and self-care. As the company thrived under her leadership, Ava realized that her true success wasn't measured in profits or promotions. It was in the legacy she would leave behind. Not just for Benton, but for the people who had supported her through the toughest times. Ava was no longer just fighting to prove herself. She was fighting to ensure that Benton and everyone who worked there would have a future where they were valued, not for how they fit in, but for what they brought to the table. In the end, it wasn't just about winning. It was about building something lasting, something that would outlive her, something that would be a beacon for future generations. And as she looked out over the city from her office window, Ava knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning.